Okay, colleagues, greetings. So this is going to be a question and answer session for the first lecture in our course, Philosophy and Methodology of the Natural and the Social Sciences. Had a whole bunch of very interesting questions, had a whole bunch of very interesting seminars as well. Got acquainted with some of the students in the course. I'm definitely looking forward. So, what I want to do today is very briefly talk about housekeeping, bureaucratic stuff, and then we'll talk philosophy, especially mechanistic versus teleological worldview, which is the biggest topic in our entire course. So first of all, the first home assignments, reading assignments, are going to be due this Saturday. We're going to maybe have a little activity on Saturday, so I will expect everybody to be familiar with the home assignments. So the first home assignment is going to be a wonderful chapter from Sean Carroll's book, The Big Picture. The first chapter is called, or the first part is called The Cosmos. It's fairly short reading. It's about 20 pages, standard A4. So you can find it, the book is in the library, but if you want, you can find the necessary excerpt in Teams, in Microsoft Teams in our folder. So also, I want to remind you that this is the final grade, our final grade composition, right? So we're going to have 3 presentations. You do 3 presentations, each is 10%. Choose a topic that you're passionate about, something, about black hole information paradox or Nietzsche on the meaning of life, right? So then you choose, of these 3 topics, the one that you find most interesting, you write an essay on. I think that the administration asks us to do a 1,000 word limit, 1,000 word recommended length, but you can write more if you want to, although I will not be able to give you extra credit for that, but just anyway. And 20% is going to be seminar, and especially in class, we're going to be doing a bit of in-class assignments. I will try to keep them interesting, and I will try, in general, like in everything we do, in the presentations, in the essays, and in the seminar, I will be more looking forward. In fact, in everything, including the exams, I will try to ask questions and give assignments which allow you to express your creativity. So creativity, not rote. Okay, this is kind of the motto of the course. I'm going to try my best and to give you choice everywhere. So you have choice with respect to the presentations, obviously, but also I'll try to give you plenty of choice on the exam so that you can specialize, and hopefully maybe even choice with respect to readings, and even if there's time, maybe I'll try to record more lectures so that you can have choice of which lectures to watch. Anyway, so when you do, so you pick 3 presentation topics. So always the best source to use is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So feel free to take a look at that. So also, I told you that in some sense, right? So we have this naturalist side of the equation. The best introductory book for that is Sean Carroll's The Big Picture. So any chapter by Sean Carroll is automatically an excellent essay topic. Feel free to take a look at Sean Carroll's YouTube channel. He has a wonderful Mindscape podcast about economics, about biology, about physics, string theory. The last episode is about criticality. He had an episode on contemporary physics and Chinese philosophy, Taoism specifically. So it's like Carroll, in many ways, is like is a big inspiration for this course. And this is the link to his website, to his podcast, in case you want to look at that. So this is I would imagine a lot of people are going to choose Carroll or be inspired by Sean Carroll to do a presentation. And again, if you listen, he has like an hour-long podcast. If you can condense that into a 10 to 15-minute presentation with or without PowerPoint, that's excellent. I'm interested in everything, and there's never enough time, unfortunately, to talk about everything. So the next thing I want to so if you are looking for a more classical philosophy of science experience, the second book is by Martin Hollis, Philosophy of Social Science. So if you want to do so here's actually the book. My Carroll's Big Picture is on loan, so I cannot show it to you. So Hollis, if you want to do Willard Van Orman Quine or Thomas Kuhn or Paul Feyerabend, this is the book I'd recommend. Or this Verstehen versus Erklären in the social sciences. Hollis is your book. And the last one, if you want to do classical social theory, the best book is a book by Alex Kalinikas. So here's the book. Here's the book by Alex Kalinikas, Social Theory. It's a wonderful University of London. It's official textbook for the University of London subject, which is called Social Theory or Sociological Theory and Analysis, an advanced discipline. Wonderful, wonderful textbook about Nietzsche, about Marx, Max Weber, Emil Durkheim, that kind of thing. So what else? So presentations. I'm looking for 10 to 15 minutes. I'm looking for live speech, not reading, hopefully, and also use of PowerPoint is completely optional, and it's like the most important requirement for the presentation is that you find something that you are passionate about, something that you are interested to talk about. Anyway, so what else do I want to say before we get on to talking about? So this is the provisional lecture plan, and so it's hard for me to we might introduce some small changes. These are the provisional dates for my lectures. If I have time, I will try to record more lectures, but this is sort of preliminary. Yes. What else do I want to talk about? So we're going to have approximately 12 topics. 0 is introduction, and lecture 14 is probably going to be revision. So, and 14 lectures is usually what we get in the course, but we'll see if there's more time. Let's talk philosophy. I hope all housekeeping is taken care of. If there's any questions, if you have any questions about housekeeping, feel free to write to me. The best way to reach me these days is through Microsoft Teams. So if there's an urgent question, people try to write emails, but I get about 50 to 100 spam messages per day, so it gets tedious looking through that. So it's like if I'm not responding to your emails, apologies. So the first question: where is math in Protons to Precedence? Right. So it's a fabulous question. It comes up over and over and over again. So we have this naturalist picture, ladder of science. So at the bottom layer, we have physics. On top of that, chemistry. On top of that, biology. On top of that, social theory. Again, levels of complexity from protons to precedence and from electrons to elections, right? So physics, only physics in the early universe. It's too hot for stable molecules and atoms. And peak of complexity is not neutron stars or black holes. Black holes, in fact, are extremely simple. No hair theorem, you might have heard. Black holes are extremely simple. The most, complex in terms of Kolmogorov complexity objects are going to be human brains or conglomerates of human brains, which we call societies, or maybe conglomerates of societies, which we call international relations or international economics, right? So from protons to precedence. So where is mathematics? We don't know. Short answer is we don't know. This is an unsolved philosophical and scientific problem. Maybe math is like scaffolding, and it holds the entire picture together. So it's like equally present on every level. Or we have this dream ever since Pythagoras and Plato, in Plato's Timaeus, talks about this. In fact, there's a Pythagorean astronomer whose name is Timaeus, and he's speaking in the dialogue. So they're trying to derive physics from mathematics. David Hilbert famously wanted to do this in the year 1900. And Max Tegmark actually is a contemporary physicist who explicitly endorses this project. And Stephen Wolfram is not doing exactly that, but something broadly speaking in that direction. So this picture is still alive. So where's math? We don't know. What I'm driving at is that maybe math is not just scaffolding, but it's the bottom layer, and everything derives from that. I hope this was clear enough. If it was not clear, feel free to ask me again in the seminar. That's question number 1. Question number 2. So I kept showing the formula, which it's usually around me somewhere, but since I was taking it to the university, it's not with me today. But the formula looked something like this. This is the Lagrangian of the standard model of particle physics. And again, most of my students specialize in math and further math because they're economists or programmers, right? You understand, Lagrangian is an optimization problem. We are looking for the principle of least action, right? So we're looking to solve differential equations, right? The way we solve differential equations, the way that quantum fluctuations evolve is by following the principle of least action. It's an optimization problem. We're trying to minimize free energy, something like that. And so I was sloppy because there's never enough time to discuss these topics in detail. So this particular formula, this is indeed what we use at the Large Hadron Collider, but it does not include something. It does not include gravity, right? So this Lagrangian of the center, this is the same formula written differently. So you have kinetic energy self-interaction of the gauge bosons, electroweak interactions of fermions, interaction between quarks and gluons, fermion masses, and coupling to Higgs. This is one way to unpack this formula. But in fact, it's not the complete formula. It's not the complete formula because it does not include gravity. And indeed, at the Large Hadron Collider, gravity is so weak, we cannot test it at the Large Hadron Collider. In fact, there are experiments right now to double-check that antiparticles, antimatter, so let's say anti-electrons, known as positrons, there's a small chance, small credence that physicists have that maybe it interacts differently with gravity. But the problem is that gravity at the quantum level is so incredibly weak that even our best, most sensitive detectors at the Large Hadron Collider, right? So CERN, Centre Européen pour Recherche Nucléaire, right, in Switzerland, it's too weak to probe. So this is again core theory from Frank Wilczek. So this is basically the effective theory which works in its regular domain of applicability. So it's very important to say works in the regular domain of applicability. Once matter gets too dense, or gravity gets too strong, or sizes become too small, this theory breaks down. So it's like, as Sean Carroll puts it, the laws of physics underlying everyday life are completely understood. It's true as far as we can tell. But we're only talking about laws of physics underlying everyday life. We don't understand black holes, we don't understand the Big Bang, and very importantly, we don't understand quantum gravity. So when gravity is very strong and scales are at the same time very small, like near black hole singularity or near the Big Bang, we do not understand it. So we do not. So there's an effective theory of quantum gravity which works in these regimes of weak gravity, right? But ultimate theory of quantum gravity is unavailable to us. And of course, quantum mechanics. There's some it's like, you understand, quantum mechanics is not exactly complete, and it could not exactly, right? So it's a lot hiding behind those words, and it could be that we're going to have a different, maybe more fundamental or more complete theory of quantum mechanics, and people are working on that as well. So it's like this is an expansion of a part of this formula. This is an expansion of a part of this formula, and a better formula to use is this one, but there's a lot hiding in here, right? So like if I understand, well, it's like. There isn't a simple one-to-one mapping, but again, this huge pile of mess is just a part of this formula, something like that. Do you need to understand this for the exam? No, but for the sake of being pedantic, because I'm sure I was a bit sloppy when I talked about this at least in some of the seminars. So, yeah, also another question that students have asked me is, like, if you take this formula, or if you take this formula, why do you need chemistry at all? Why do you need biology? And this is the problem with reductionism. Again, this formula is nice, but it's very difficult to solve this formula exactly. It's computationally prohibitively hard to solve this formula exactly when scales become too large. So what do I mean by scales too large? So if you take something like a very simple, again, Mickey Mouse example, so Newton's formula for gravity, which is wrong in a sense of incomplete. So it's m1 multiplied by m2 divided by r squared multiplied by the constant g, right? So this is Newton's formula for the law of gravity. It's incomplete because you have to add Einsteinian correction. But even if you just focus on this formula without Einstein, It is, this formula gives you the forces. If you want to see the evolution of the system, you need to build a differential equation. And this differential equation cannot be solved for more than two bodies. It's like if you take sun and earth, that's okay. But if you take sun, earth, and the moon, you cannot have what you have general closed form solution. There is no general closed form solution. The system is chaotic. Chaos is a very important notion. So you can have chaos and determinism at the same time. So chaos and determinism is compatible. I'm going to insist on deterministic interpretations of quantum mechanics for philosophical, methodological reasons. We're going to get there at some point, not right now. I don't want to talk about this right now. But again, even if you assume determinism, you can have chaos, which is to say that imperceptible, infinitesimally small differences in initial conditions lead to completely different solutions. This is the three-body problem. Now, you could say, well, if three-body problem exists, why is astronomy so good? And the reason is because the sun is just so massive. The sun is something like 99.998. So it's 99.98 mass of the solar system. So effectively, there's only the sun and dust around the sun. Like Jupiter has a tiny impact. But it's like, by and large, the three-body problem is not an issue for astronomy the way we do it in the solar system. The system is not chaotic because the solar system is dominated by this huge mass. It's like effectively for in terms of calculations. But long-term calculations, if the masses of the three bodies are approximately the same, no general closed form solution exists. There are some interesting exceptions to that, like you can have those Lagrange points, for example, that Lagrange has discovered, right? But these are very special points. Anyway, so we're getting in the weeds. Hopefully you understand. So what it means is that in principle, chemistry is reducible to physics, but not in practice. In principle, biology is reducible to physics, but not in practice. In practice, the easiest way to predict animal behavior is to look at regularities, patterns, kind of. Chemistry was a successful science before the quantum mechanical nature of the chemical bond was understood. Biology was a successful science before we discovered the chemical basis, molecular basis of the DNA. So there's this relative autonomy between the levels. And once we get to social theory, we're not going to be deriving Hobbesian Worldview against Stoll or something like that from this formula. No, we're going to, it's like there's going to be, again, relative autonomy of the field. Emil Durkheim calls this sui generis, that there's kind of dynamics of its own kind that exists on a given level. Again, preview for future classes, but we'll talk about this more down the line. So these were the questions. Now, in addition to that, there were some other questions that have to do with teleology. And these are very difficult questions, and I don't, this is an explosive topic, and in fact, in an important respect, teleology versus mechanicism is a war. It's a battle that is raging on, and that has been raging on for for thousands of years. So I don't expect people to automatically agree with me or believe what I'm saying. In fact, again, in this divide between teleological and mechanistic worldview, I was on the teleological side when I was, when I was a first and second year bachelor student a long time ago. And this was in many ways the most important transformation that has happened to me in my life. I want to talk about this for some time, maybe not for too long, because in an important sense, the entire rest of the course is going to be trying to explore the mechanistic worldview. So I'm going to be constantly defending the mechanistic worldview against the teleological worldview. So let me give just a little bit of a preview right now. So first of all, a YouTube viewer, call me Shibboleth, asked a very important question about explanation. What does it mean to explain? How does science explain it? In fact, he or she also alluded to Schopenhauer. And Schopenhauer is definitely a very interesting philosopher. And again, this question on what exactly it means to explain, and the way we understand our own behavior, and how does physics explain stuff. What does it mean to appeal to a formula when you explain? Again, so all of these are complicated stories. But let me just try to keep it maybe simple to some extent, right? So first of all, again, in German you have these words verstehen and erklären. So verstehen und erklären, right? So verstehen would mean like empathetic understanding from within, and erklären would mean something like explanation, external explanation, maybe in terms of a formula. Again, I'm oversimplifying a bit. And I suppose within the mechanistic picture, within the mechanistic naturalist picture, the only real explanation is this erklären. So it's like the best thing that we can do is we can, so to speak, track patterns in past experience. So in some sense, we can only see the appearances. Human mind is limited. We can only see the appearances, not things in themselves. So like the like real understanding, real, God's eye view explanations are just simply not available to human intellect, right? And so we see this formula, again, the Lagrangian, was the standard model of particle physics, but we do not see the deep reason behind it. Isaac Newton very famously had this phrase, hypothesis non fingo, I do not feign hypotheses. He says, it's like my formula, F is equal to m1 multiplied by m2 divided by r squared multiplied by the constant g, right? The law of gravity seems to track the motions of the heavenly bodies very well, and also maybe explain how cannonballs fly very well. Explain in the sense of, again, track patterns in experience. So be able to subsume experiences under one generalized rule. But Newton understood this very well, that he does not see a deep reason as to why this formula must be true, right? And, I read you this wonderful quote from Jean-Paul Sartre, which is also available as a separate video on YouTube if you want to watch that, right? How do we know that the formula will continue into the future? How do we know that my tongue will not turn into a caterpillar in the next moment? So again, it's a very important point. Again, you have the ancient skepticism, modern skepticism with philosophers such as David Hume and Immanuel Kant, right? We do not see things in themselves. It appears that human mind is limited. We only see the appearances. So science, in this sense, never deals with certainty. Call Me Shibboleth also talked about this in his or her comments. Science does not deal with certainty. The best thing that we can do is credences, and this is like Bayesian epistemology, abduction, inference to the best explanation. So it's like, Geraint Lewis, one of my favorite cosmologists, in a recent video, I should link to that, he talks about how, when talking about dark matter, he would bet a car that dark matter is made of particles, but he would not bet a house. That's a good way to approach science. Science is about betting, like credibility. We never know anything with 100% certainty. That's just not in the cards. If you imagine some kind of crazy Boltzmann brain scenario, or a Cartesian evil demon, it's always possible to concoct a scenario in which we would be completely mistaken, again, or Bostrom's simulation hypotheses, or in the movie The Matrix, right? So maybe we're all brains in vats, and all of this experience is just a product of some a mischievous scientist trying to fool us. How can we get out of that skepticism, right? We only ever see appearances, right? But still, within this worldview, you can, so to speak, you can bet certain things you find more credible or less credible. The fact that absolute certainty is unavailable to us doesn't mean that anything goes, right? It's like you can be as skeptical as you want, but at some point you have to decide. If you're thirsty, is the water going to poison you or not, right? You could say it's a blind leap of faith that I take a sip from this glass in blind faith that it will not continue to poison me. But at the same time, I would say, science doesn't give me bulletproof reason to trust that, but it gives me some reason to trust that, right? Anyway, now when we get to teleology, teleological versus mechanistic worldview. So we'll talk about this more in the next lecture. But again, I want to say that there's this idea how ever since ancient past, in fact, there seems to be an evolutionary reason. Again, human beings have this built-in agent detection device, right? So it's like when you're running through a forest, our great ape ancestors, right? When they heard a rustling sound, it was evolutionary better for them to assume that there was an agent there. So we have this very robust agent detection mechanism. So we always assume that everything has a soul. At least that's the kind of evolutionary story that evolutionary psychologists tell us, right? And so the idea is that, like, when the ancients tried to explain why magnets attract, for example, they would use analogy of love. Right? The two pieces of magnets love each other, right? Or again, another example that I gave, Thales, right, talks about the eclipse. So I should add Thales somewhere, somehow. Yeah, so let me write the name of Thales here, right? So the ancients might have thought that an eclipse is gods are really mad at humanity, so much that they've blotted out the sun. But Thales says no, there's a mathematical regularity. In fact, it's just, the motion of the moon and the sun, and the moon is blocking the sun. And you can have a mathematical formula which explains that, right? Explanation, you understand. Tracking patterns in experience. Within a certain margin of error, because experience is never gives us perfect accuracy, right? But within a certain margin of error, a formula seems to approximate our past experience very well. So we're trying to, again, from Thales to let me write to Newton. From Thales to Newton to Darwin to Turing, we slowly chip away at this teleological picture. So there's less and less teleology. There's fewer and fewer instances of teleology left, something like that. And the point is that, again, we don't know everything, so it's possible that the mechanistic picture is wrong. So I'm not trying to convince you with 100% certainty, because that's unavailable to us. I'm not saying that there are bulletproof arguments for the mechanistic worldview, but my own slogan is that our time and effort is much better spent trying to think through the implications of the mechanistic picture rather than fighting against it. The mechanistic worldview seems to be a very fruitful research program. We have understood so much, again, in practical, pragmatic terms, so much about the world around us, being able to send humans to space, being able to send satellites to space, being able to cure all sorts of diseases, having vaccines, COVID vaccines, right? So this from this reason is and ought to be the slave of the passions, says David Hume. So in this utilitarian, pragmatic sense, science appears to work. No guarantees that it will continue into the future, but it appears to work right now. Like me being able to give this lecture online, you being able to listen to it, right? This is also something that science, this wonderful word that, of course, we have to be careful with using, because what exactly do we mean by science? That's a separate question, but still, right? So what I'm driving at is that, again, I don't think that there's a knockdown argument in favor of the mechanistic worldview. But again, I feel that time and effort is much better spent trying to understand it. And like, for me, this was very much a Kuhnian paradigm shift. I was on the side of the teleology. I was very much on the side of the teleology, and gradually, bit by bit, it was like a Gestalt switch. You understand? Like you see the same picture, but from a different angle, like this famous duck-rabbit picture. Maybe we can talk about this at some other point, about Gestalt switches and why that's an important notion. So, like what I'm going to be doing in this course is mostly trying to explore the mechanistic picture. The bulk of our time is going to be spent like that. And this is an executive decision that I'm making as a lecturer. At the same time, I'm happy for other people outside of this course to pursue the teleological worldview. And I'm also very happy if students try to explore the teleological worldview in their presentations. Some students did last year and in the previous years. And hopefully we'll do so this year as well. I think it's important to have a dialogue, so I'm not dogmatic about my mechanicism. But again, the executive decision is that most of the time you got to pick your battles. Now, also I have to tell you that in terms of credences, betting a car versus betting a house, I want to say, like, to me, the teleological worldview, this idea that there are inherent purposes in nature, maybe inherent consciousness in nature, like divine consciousness, some form of religious picture. To me, I'm not going to bet anything on the truth of that picture, right? And conversely, I would bet everything or almost everything that this picture is wrong. Like if somebody by the name of Alfred mentioned Tom Nagel, and Nagel is a very important defender. Here I have Nagel's name. very important defender of the teleological picture today. He's an atheist. Nagel is an atheist, and he defends this very peculiar atheistic version of teleology. And, I think that's fine. Again, I'm a big believer in free and equal discussion. And, John Stuart Mill talks about how it's very important to understand what are the best arguments on the other side of the issue. And I do think that Nagel's arguments are probably as strong as they get, especially the qualia arguments. But what I'm driving at is that Nagel's picture of the world, to me, is as extravagant. I don't want to dismiss Nagel. Nagel is a very serious philosopher. But to me, my credibility, my personal credence that I have in the correctness of Nagel's picture is about as much credence as I would give to the truth of Lovecraftian mythos, or the mythos of Warhammer universe, or this idea that in the next moment, my tongue will turn into a centipede and I will have to tear it out with my bare hands. Is it possible that Lovecraft is right and you have Cthulhu and Azathoth, at the root of all reality? Is it possible that secretly there are, Warhammer chaos gods like Khorne and Nurgle orchestrating our universe? Is it possible that my tongue will turn into a centipede? Yes, it's possible. It's possible. It's thinkable. I do not have a guarantee that it's not true, but it's not a possibility I am taking seriously. Like, again, betting a car, betting a house, I would bet more or less everything on the notion that, Lovecraftian mythos is just figment of his imagination, of Lovecraft's imagination. It's like it has no relation to reality. It's like within Warhammer universe, this idea that you can sacrifice newborn babies, or you can sacrifice virgins to achieve immortality. It's like, I'm not betting anything on that. In the same fashion, I'm not betting anything on the truth of Nagel's picture. Without having knockdown arguments, but still, again, it's like, anyway, you understand. Conversely, I think it's very important to, somebody asked about the mechanistic view of the universe, these wonderful formulas, and gods. So teleology is not theology. Teleology is not theology. Usually, religious worldview is teleological, but it doesn't have to be. So teleology, again, strictly speaking, is not theology. So wow, I cannot spell this time of day. Teleology is not theology. And Nagel is a wonderful example of that, right? So he's a teleological thinker, but an atheist. So teleology is not theology. Okay. So you can have theological pictures which are not teleological. You can have teleological pictures which are not theological. Or you can have teleological pictures which are theological. So every quadrant is possible, I guess. But what I'm driving at is that, think about this. This was a very important thought experiment when I was, again, most of my students are second-year students. So when I was a second-year student, this was a very important thought experiment for me. So we only see appearances. So imagine right now, this moment, we would see an angel with golden wings enter through the window and stand in front of me and talk to me. Would I conclude from that teleological picture is true, or that theological picture is true, right? Would that convince me of the truth of religion? And my point is that no, because there are so many extravagant scenarios that you can use to explain this away. Maybe I am drunk. Maybe I am high. Maybe I am psychotic. Maybe I'm mad. Maybe I'm imagining a winged angel. Or maybe I'm a Boltzmann brain. If you don't know what Boltzmann brains are, ask me in the seminar. Or Nick Bostrom has this simulation hypothesis, right? So maybe all of this is simulated by somebody, by more advanced alien species or something like that, right? And they're just messing with my head for fun. Or maybe we live in a matrix. You have probably seen the movie The Matrix, right? So if you see something extravagant like an angel with golden wings, that's not a proof of the teleological or theological picture, right? And that was a very important thought I've had when I was, again, the age of most of my students, or at least most of the students who are taking my course face-to-face for credit. And so, I want to say, at the end of the day, so it's like, Alfred pointed out that there are serious thinkers who believe that teleology is right. From Aristotle to Thomas Aquinas to Leibniz to Nagel today. And it's true. There are serious philosophers who have reasons for teleological worldview. But you have to, it's an ancient battle. It's an ancient dispute. Because you have other philosophers. So I would say the Buddha, Democritus, Lao Tzu. So there's ancient and venerable traditions of anti-teleological thinking, of mechanistic thinking. So it's like you cannot just appeal to ancient authority and say, well, there are arguments on that side. There are arguments on one side. There are arguments on the other side as well. And I want to say sort of, like for me, anti-teleology, the mechanistic worldview, has there's an arc from Buddha, Democritus, and Lao Tzu to Nietzsche, Marx, and Foucault, right? And I'm on this side of the battle, if you want. I'm pushing for the mechanistic worldview. I'm biases up front. I want to say I'm trying to keep an open mind. I'm not trying to indoctrinate my students, but at the same time, you have to, I'm telling you what my allegiances are. And also, I don't mean to get people upset. But I want to say that in my own experience, when I see people who are anti-physicalists, who are sort of so physicalism or materialism or mechanicism, to me, these are mostly broadly synonymous. And naturalism, also be broadly synonymous, right? So people who want to wiggle out of that. Most people are just clueless, unfortunately. Most people are clueless about everything. So it's like to a lot of students, unfortunately, it is still a shock. The advances of modern science, things like fMRI scans or the split brain experiments or this psychoactive substances. So like a whole battery of real empirical arguments that say that consciousness is purely the result of a mechanical process. So think of your memories. I can mechanically screw with your brain and mess up your memories, or I can mechanically damage your brain and this will change your personality. So a mechanical interaction changes something about your soul, right? So this, to me, it's not a knockdown argument in favor of saying that soul is mechanical, but it's a pretty good argument. It's one of the battery of arguments. So most people who don't buy the physicalist picture, unfortunately, I feel are just clueless. They don't know enough about modern science. But some people do, like Tom Nagel, for example. And in this case, I think they're just too clever. It's like if you work hard enough, you can make any worldview work. You can believe Lovecraft or Warhammer or Matrix, or that your tongue will turn into a centipede. And I don't mean this as a term of abuse, but you have to understand flat Earth as well. Like if you really, really, really want to work hard enough at this, you can believe that the Earth is flat, and there's a danger in that, right? And it's like the debate between teleological and mechanistic worldview. I feel that if we were to have this seriously, it's an endless, fruitless debate. Kant has this pejorative use of the word dialectic, like this endless dialogue which goes nowhere. And to me, teleology versus mechanicism is exactly this kind of Kantian pejorative dialectic. It's not moving anywhere. So what is my conclusion? My conclusion is time and effort is best spent trying to push the mechanistic picture as far as it will go. If the mechanistic picture runs into insurmountable problems, then we'll look for other approaches. But so far, this is the executive decision that I have to make. And at the end of the day, yes, I think that unfortunately, again, when people are being too clever, right, in defending the anti-physicalist worldview, they're appealing to Gapp's arguments, they are violating Occam's razor, they are engaged in wishful thinking, and this big, huge problem of evil, right? It's like, if teleology is right, I do not understand why there's evil in the world. I think that on the teleological worldview, the problem of evil is the biggest unsolved problem. And anything you can say, you cannot say that mechanistic picture is wishful thinking. It's just not. I have an acquaintance, you could say my friend, who's a professional theologian, and he was recently giving a public talk, and he was saying about how, when people sit down with a glass of wine or a glass of beer, and one of them says, you know what, I'm an atheist. So my theologian friend was saying that this person, this atheist with a glass of beer, they do not understand what it means to be an atheist. Because real commitment to atheism, sort of from Galileo onwards, is this notion that the world is the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter. In the words of Immanuel Kant, der Schlund des zwecklosen Chaos der Materie. Der Schlund des zwecklosen Chaos der Materie. And I agree with my theologian friend. Most people who half-heartedly drinking beer say that they're atheists do not understand what they commit themselves to, right? But if you really do understand, this picture of the cold, blind, deterministic universe, the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter, it's anything but wishful thinking. It's anything but wishful thinking, right? And I wanted to mention, maybe if there's time, we'll have time to go into this, but I feel that, Nagel's arguments for teleology, this is an asterisk, nobody will understand this apart from maybe one or two people watching this, but Nagel's arguments for teleology have to do with qualia, and when I was younger, I thought qualia was an important problem. I don't think that anymore. Basically for Freudian and Foucauldian reasons, because I think that qualia privilege consciousness too much, right? So there's this. So against qualia, I want to deploy Turing and, let's say, Turing and Lacan, like this double remedy. So Turing is going to tell us that consciousness is just computation, and Lacan is going to tell us that human beings don't understand themselves, right? So it's like again, in terms of this Verstehen und Erklären, right? We don't even understand in this Verstehen way. We don't understand ourselves. Say Freud and Lacan. We don't understand even ourselves. And also, I feel that, as a tentative provisional solution, if you use certain versions of panpsychism, you can diffuse the qualia arguments. You can have... Panpsychism is a bit of a fifth wheel, I feel. Panpsychism is a bit of a fifth wheel, like it's not doing any real work. But as a provisional potential solution, like if I was pushed to a wall and somebody would, tell me, mechanicist, answer the qualia problem, I would say panpsychism. Like Eddington, Arthur Eddington and Bertrand Russell toyed with the idea of panpsychism. Like you take all the formulas, but also you say that there's an element of consciousness which just goes along for the ride and makes no difference to the formulas. It's a fifth wheel, but it's a cop-out solution, like Mickey Mouse. Okay, I mean this is a question and answer, so I hope I'm not boring people too much with this stuff. But let me continue because I do want to talk about mechanistic versus teleological. I want to say that for me the most important. So even though mechanistic worldview is bleak, and it's not wishful thinking, it's not a nice world to live in, where within the teleological worldview, if you have a pimple on your forehead or a splinter in your toe, this is a purpose within the larger scheme of nature. On the mechanistic worldview, your loved one dies, deal with it. There's no reason for that. It's just absurdity of everyday life. But I feel that, to stare this abyss in the eye, the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter, right? To stare the abyss in the eye, this is what it means to do philosophy. And I want to say that my positive argument for embracing the mechanistic worldview is that it's a difficult worldview, but it allows a much better, a much more productive way of relating, of treating our relationship, understanding in relationship to nature, our understanding in relationship to oneself, our understanding in relationship of ethics, of immediate others, and of politics. Let me talk about this for 5 minutes maybe. So first of all, I begin by talking about how I think, everything I know about physics, biology, and chemistry tells me that the best way to understand nature is through the mechanistic worldview, right? So this is what I mean. This is what I mean when I talk about understanding, that mechanistic worldview is superior to teleological worldview in terms of explanation of nature. I don't know, in terms of epistemology. But then, much more importantly, because again, by trade, I'm a political philosopher. I'm interested in issues of morality and politics. So first of all, again, this notion of understanding oneself. Some students asked me about the William Golding quote about the dark tunnel at the back of the head, right? So I feel it's very important. Descartes and the empty complacency of Homo economicus. These are the targets in this course. Targets I'm fighting against. We need to, we need to be a bit more self-conscious, sit down and meditate and realize that there is this dark tunnel. There's this blind spot, dark tunnel at the back of the head. There's all sorts of things, beliefs, desires, values that pop from that dark tunnel, which we do not understand, which we have not generated. Yes, we make choices, but we make choices on the basis of things which we have not chosen, right? And so, broadly speaking, so it's like against this naive, naive version of, a kind of liberalism, right? I want to counterpose the ideas of genealogy and history. So this is Herder struggling, fighting against Kant, right? Thought, the self is linguistically constituted, and language is social and therefore historical. Therefore, our innermost selves, we are historical in nature, right? And this is Hegel, Marx, Nietzsche, Freud, let's say Foucault down the line. This is going to be their criticism of Kant. We have to understand human subjectivity as product of history. Again, talked about dark tunnel at the back of the head. Inside leads outside. If you sit down and you close your eyes, you meditate, you realize that you are a product of larger forces, which you cannot simply understand by closing your eyes and thinking about it. You have to open your eyes and engage in sciences. Read biology textbooks, read chemistry textbooks, read history textbooks and social theory textbooks. Inside leads outside. Closing your eyes and meditating shows to you that there's more about you that you do not understand, that you need to, avail yourself of those larger disciplines. But ultimately, I feel that what this is gonna, the mechanistic worldview, what it's gonna allow you to do is to take proper care of yourself. Again, know thyself, the Greeks would say, gnothi se auto, right? And taking care of oneself, epimeleia he auto, right? So this very, very important Greek phrases, right? So human beings are bundles of habits. We are bundles of habits, bundles of coping mechanisms. We'll talk about this more when we talk about, Freud and Heidegger. Human beings are anxious, mostly unconscious products of larger forces, right? And it's like, I want to say, jumping ahead, right? So this double attack, Nietzsche and Freud are going to say that free will and immortal soul are fictions. They are lies, if you want, mimetic viruses. So the teleological worldview is a mimetic virus, which was, let's focus on free will and immortal soul. Free will and immortal soul are lies which were invented by resentful slaves as weapons of psychological warfare. Okay, so I don't just want to defend the mechanistic worldview. I want to go on the attack. Right? And we need to understand human beings as products of these larger forces. Again, philosophy as therapy, but also philosophy as self-defense, right? And so on the one hand, it's possible to give, with Turing and Darwin, it's possible to give a mechanistic account of human nature. But Nietzsche and Freud are going to imbue this mechanistic account with an important positive program of reevaluation of values, right? And therefore will allow you to take care of yourself, right? And I feel that proper understanding of what human beings are will allow you to make better decisions in life, major life decisions, like getting married, having children, choosing your career. Not to mention that, again, in terms of determinism versus free will, I want to say, I'm going to talk about this at some other point, but I think the proper way of taking care of yourself, right? Of seeing ourselves in this world. It's like when you decide on whom to marry, this shouldn't be a matter of your free choice. Like you sit there like Jean-Paul Sartre, you look into the abyss looks back at you, and you understand that it's up to you to marry this person or not marry this person, or to choose this career or not to choose this career. Ideally, it should not be like that. Ideally, it should be obvious to you that you are in love with this person, that they're a good match for you, that you enable each other, that you can be happy together, right? And it's an obvious choice, and it's difficult for you to resist making this choice. Notice, and kind of this feeling of lack of agency. It's an obvious choice, and it would take an effort to resist that. Mm-hmm. Where is free will in that? There's no free will. No free will. It's an obvious person for me to marry. It's an obvious university for me to enroll to. It's an obvious career for me to choose, right? So like I don't have to think. This is what I feel. What proper human flourishing looks like. I'm talking about too many things at the same time, but hopefully, this is either at least to some extent clear or will become clearer as the classes proceed. But I'm a big opponent of the teleological worldview. I'm also a big opponent of the idea of free will. And I feel that determinism is not only true, but it also makes your life better if you understand it properly. It's again mechanistic determinism. And also, again, the way you treat others, being compassionate to family and friends, especially, people who are depressed, people who are psychotic, or, like, again, substances. You take a sip of wine, and this changes your personality. A mechanical impact on your brain changes your personality, the way you behave, right? And a very important experience, maybe we'll have time to talk about this at some point or ask me in class. I had a very close friend who, this happened a number of years ago. They had a very severe psychotic episode, and it was unfortunate and tragic in so many ways. But it's like seeing a person, like normal person, collapse, break down, and behave for maybe about a week completely out of character, and then they were given medication, and they were given certain kind of physiological interventions. Certain kinds of, I think it's transcranial stimulation or something like that. So, like, anyway, so you understand, medication and other physical and chemical impacts on the brain. And the person got back to normal, and they were restored to normalcy, right? This was such an important experience in my life. And this was a fairly close acquaintance of mine, right? So understanding that it's not immortal soul. People, it is mechanical, it's electrochemistry of the brain, seeing that with your own eyes. Jupiter forbid this happened to anybody right? So it's a tragic experience. Let's hope you never have to deal with anything like that. But if you do, it's a very eye-opening experience. But at the end of the day, I feel that even mechanistic, deterministic worldview should properly inform, things such as prison reform, being more compassionate to prisoners, being more compassionate to criminals. Because by and large, I don't think that there's any good reason to believe that criminals are to blame in a deep sense for what they do, right? Life is just motion of limbs. People who commit crimes are probably, they had unfortunate childhood or less than harmonious circumstances, right? So it's like, you understand. So I feel that there's a deep reformist program in there. Prison reform, policy change, humanity facing global challenges and how we go about doing that, climate change, all sorts of other issues, right? So it's like global politics, the way, mechanistic, deterministic worldview is supposed to inform that, right? And again, there's, if you want to equate mechanistic, deterministic worldview with atheism, in philosophers such as Hobbes, Mill, and Marx, there's a very important appreciation for political value of atheism, mechanistic determinism as a progressive political program, which fights against conservative, conservative superstition. Let's put it that way. I wanted to also mention at least a little bit about realism in international relations. I'm not necessarily sure I want to talk about this now, but kind of everything fits in together. Remind me some other time. I'll talk about this. But again, I feel that the mechanistic worldview informs realism in international relations, and the founders of the realist traditions, people, Thucydides, Machiavelli, Hobbes, they were anti-teleological. They were mechanicists, and this allowed them to understand politics better, I feel. We'll talk about this more, hopefully, down the line. So it's like, again, is there any guarantee that mechanistic picture is true? No, there's no guarantee. But you see, life is too short, and you gotta make decisions. And also, it's very important, again, to choose your battles wisely. I think Erwin Rommel, if I'm not mistaken, once said that you should never engage in battles that you gain nothing by winning. And again, like fighting, I'm having this debate, mechanistic versus teleological, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. Again, the majority of our time I want to spend in exploring the naturalist, mechanicist, materialist, determinist picture, right? This is me choosing my battles. I think Nietzsche also said that we are defined by our enemies. We should choose enemies wisely. But also with Karl Popper, I agree with Karl Popper. I'm happy that other people are pursuing what I feel are blind alleys, because this is how science progresses. But also I have to say that I don't think that I already mentioned this, but I don't feel that teleology versus mechanicism, I don't think it's an innocent choice, right? I feel that the teleological worldview has a huge potential for people inflicting harm on themselves, self-harm. And I have this CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which I think is a wonderful and wonderfully useful tool, something that has made my life better and has made lives of so many people I know better. And it relies on a mechanistic picture of human behavior. So cognitive behavioral therapy. I absolutely cannot spell this time of day. I'm sorry. And, you know, something I can... Cognitive behavioral therapy is something I can highly recommend, especially when it's done well. My favorite introduction to cognitive behavioral therapy is going to be by Jason Setterfield. Jason Setterfield. It's available online. I think a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful therapist. So he's a psychologist from University of California, San Diego, I think, or something like that. Anyway, but sort of also Marx is going to talk about how religion is the opium of the people, you know, Buddhist worldview. No time to talk about all this. And it's like, you know, it's like choosing our battles wisely. So again, it's a topic I want to return to at some other point in the future. But it's like, I feel that there are other questions in life, more important questions. Let me give you one example. So there's this Buddhist ideal of ataraxia. Buddhist and ancient Greek ideal of ataraxia. It's kind of, you sit down, you meditate, you bracket out all your desires, you just go with the flow. You have these streaks in Buddhism, in Epicureanism, in Taoism, right? Or in, for example, in Aristotle, you have this vision of eudaimonia, of, you know, human beings developing their rich and varied abilities, being like roses in full bloom. Like, to me, this is a big unsolved question. I've had an experience. I've spent about a year mostly just meditating. It just so happened, for biographical reasons, I could afford to do that. For about a year, I lived almost like a monk. Spent most of my time meditating. I was super happy that year. It was a wonderful year of my life. But I did not engage in any productive activity. Like, this year or last year was very different for me. Because, right, these days, my choices, I wake up in the morning, and I got to be passionate about teaching, passionate about learning, passionate about preparing the best possible lecture. And I feel that these are the two ideals in my life which pull in very different directions. That the better lecturer I become, the less I meditate. And the more I meditate, the more I'm tempted to just quit the university, right? And so, like to me, that's a real, difficult, unsolved problem. I have no idea how to go about solving it. It's like, and if a student asked me for my honest recommendation, I would say I have no idea. I think it's a complicated choice, and you should think for yourself and decide for yourself. But I think that both of these options preliminarily sound good and have something going for them. So, you know, this is the kind of battle I'd rather engage in rather than, you know, fighting teleology versus mechanicism. So, incidentally, I feel that, you know, this was a Q&A, so it was a bit haphazard. I will definitely try in my second lecture to be more to the point, but, you know, you understand, Q&As are Q&As for a reason. So let me maybe look at the chat, because there's a whole bunch of stuff written in the chat. I cannot promise I'll answer everything because I'm already feeling a bit tired. So yeah, but Call Me Shibboleth is asking for a very important clarification, which I definitely need to give. So in this course, I am using physicalism and naturalism and materialism and I don't know, physicalism, naturalism, materialism, mechanistic determinism, determinism, as broadly speaking synonymous. So broadly speaking, these are all synonyms for me. Now, philosophers have a way of always making minute distinctions. So sometimes, you know, these could be distinguished between, but like for me in this course, by and large, I want to treat them as synonymous, at least preliminarily. So at least until further notice, this is what I mean. And teleological worldview. So telos in Greek means aim or purpose or goal. So what teleological worldview means is that there are inherent purposes, inherent values in nature. So the opposing worldview is I'm calling a mechanistic worldview. And the idea is that the universe is the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter. As Thomas Hobbes writes in the Leviathan, life is nothing but the motion of limbs. Or as most importantly, Hobbes says, whatsoever is the object of any man's appetite or desire is that which man calls good. And the object of man's hate and aversion is what man calls evil. There being nothing simply and absolutely so. So the core of the mechanistic anti-teleological worldview is that nothing is good or evil in itself. If you want, this is Nietzsche before Nietzsche. Hobbes is Nietzsche before Nietzsche. This is death of God before Nietzsche. Nothing is good or evil in itself. Reevaluation of values. So this is the biggest stake. And obviously, so teleological worldviews are usually theological. They presuppose an existence of God, but they don't have to. So telos means aim or purpose or goal, whereas theos means God, right? And theos, thea, theon, right? Deus in Latinization, right? But it's like usually teleological worldviews are theological, and usually religious worldviews are teleological, but strictly speaking, they don't have to be. Yeah. So, Colmy Shibboleth is also talking about computationalism. So, this is a difficult and complicated topic. I probably have to say this is something I don't really understand very much about. So, excellent presentation topic if anybody wants to talk about this. How many philosophers of physics today, or physicists, want to talk about information as intrinsic. Information and computation as intrinsic. So my immediate intuition is that probably it's not. Like, I'm not betting on it. I'm not counting on information and computation being intrinsic, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. So Stephen Wolfram definitely is one of them. Leonard Susskind, I think, is another one, and maybe other names could be given here. Black hole information paradox, again, this information theory in physics, right? So maybe computation is intrinsic, but again, my intuition that probably is not, but I'm not sure. I don't understand enough about this stuff, unfortunately, right now. So I'd say you know, as far as I'm concerned, more research is needed. Yeah. So Colmy Shibboleth also alluding to Lovecraft. I don't think that we can bear the indifference of the world without going mad. Oh yeah. Lovecraft has wonderful quotes about that. You know, the most merciful thing in the world is the inability of the mind to correlate all its contents, says Lovecraft. That if humanity could really understand, like, all of the disparate branches of knowledge, we would go mad from the revelation, or would just, you know, destroy our minds and flee into the darkness of a new dark age of ignorance. This Lovecraft talks about this. I do feel that like Heidegger and Lovecraft, that there's potentially some interesting point of contact there, that sort of maybe all of our civilization is just an attempt to sublimate away the terror of the unknown. Heidegger, Lovecraft. I'm sorry, you can understand I'm just screwing around already at this stage. Any semblance of seriousness is gone, right? So, but this idea, Heidegger talks about this technological understanding of being, how we strive to see everything as an artifact, see nature as artifact. How you go into the woods and you don't see the forest, but you see timber. So timber, not sort of this ancient and mystical forest, right? And I feel that there's a Lovecraftian way of reading Heidegger, that we are so afraid of this primordial mystery of the forest that we want to turn everything into a resource to be used, right? So we build buildings, we invent technology, we make microphones and cameras and computers and books, just not to think of the fundamental terror of existence, kind of primordial sublimation. Kind of an alternative, because, you know, Freud talks about how everything is about sex. Everything is about sex except for sex, which is about power, right? So on this Heideggerian Lovecraftian worldview, everything is about not thinking about the fundamental terror of the unknown. So Stuart Keating is asking difficult questions about Christopher Langan. I don't think I've heard about this before. Again, more research is needed. Thank you, Stuart. I'll try to make the time to look into this because what you're writing about sounds interesting. Yeah. Call me shibboleth again. So opposition between ataraxia and eudaimonia. Yeah, I feel this is genuinely a very deep biographical problem for me in life. Usually, not this year, but usually I get the luxury during the summer months of, taking care of myself a bit more, especially engaging in, meditative practice, going on retreats sometimes. And I always feel so very calm and grounded and meditative by the end of August. And then the September hits, and there's such a huge disjunction between these two. So I always feel this opposition between ataraxia and eudaimonia. I feel them so severely every September. It's so jarring. But I gotta tell you that every professor I know of who take their teaching seriously, everybody tells me that September is the most difficult month in the year. I recently had a friend of mine who's also a professor of philosophy tell me how they've almost had a nervous breakdown in the first lecture that they were giving just a couple days ago, because it's just so jarring, especially after the quarantine, having not seen students face to face. Now you get back and you give a lecture, and it's taxing. I have this class, I have about 80 people enrolled face to face in the university, and I've seen all 80 in 4 separate groups last week. And I gotta tell you, this does things to my mind. It's like I wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweat because my subconscious is trying to process this. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit too biographical, but you understand. So I am passionate about teaching. I'm not ready to give it up, but a part of me tells me that maybe I would be better off. In fact, maybe the whole world would be better off if I became a meditator. I don't know. It's a complicated question. Hegel. I have to tell you, I'm a big fan of Hegel. I have to tell you, I'm also a big fan of left Hegelian, atheistic, secular, mechanistic reading of Hegel. And I'm gonna give you that at some point. Well, it's already there on my channel to some extent, but hopefully I'll give you a better version of that. I have to say, shameless plug, I've spent all summer recording Coursera course, Introduction to Political Philosophy. It's due to go live any day now. It's almost ready. It's like the final touches are made. In fact, the technical staff were telling me that it would already be online. Somehow there's some unexpected delays. So yeah, many of the same topics I cover there, and I'm gonna give a mechanistic reading of Hegel there. I kind of failed to give, I think, a very good mechanistic reading of Marx, but this is what this course is going to be for. Okay, good question. So, Pippa, hopefully I'm reading your name correctly, is asking, how does ataraxia versus eudaimonia, so ataraxia versus eudaimonia, this is basically meditation versus passionate teaching. Meditation and letting go versus striving and hanging on, trying to be passionately trying to be the best possible teacher, right? How does this fit in with the mechanistic versus teleological debate? So what I was saying is that within the mechanistic worldview, when I'm trying to think through the implications of the mechanistic worldview, so let me add. So what are the practical consequences? Practical consequences of mechanicism. And as far as I'm concerned, the biggest unsolved practical I don't know, I'm not phrasing that very well. The biggest unsolved practical question of mechanicism is, what does this lead to? What should you do? If you realize that the universe is the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter, what do? Do you just sit down and meditate? and just, like Mahavira, you sit down, and in a deep state of meditative trance, you stop eating, you stop breathing, and you stop the beating of your heart, and you cease to exist. You achieve nirvana, right? This is ataraxia. Yeah, ataraxia, I feel, is a pretty good Greek translation of the Sanskrit word nirvana. So letting go, just letting go, and just meditating for the rest of your life. Like, what should you do? Should you just do that, or do you try in this quasi-Aristotelian fashion? And I'm using Aristotle in different senses here, because Aristotle is also a fan of the teleological worldview, but here I'm using Aristotle's ideal of eudaimonia, of human beings as roses in full bloom. So specifically, the development of rich and varied abilities. So, I don't know, passionate development of rich and varied abilities. You see, that's different. That's different. It's like Mahavira, as dying of asphyxiation, is not passionate development of rich and varied abilities, right? If I decided to become a yoga teacher, I would not be, or a Buddhist monk, I would not be doing this, right? Although, it's like meditation obviously helps sometimes, and I do like to bring a singing bowl to class and doing a bit of meditation in class. We need to do it this year as well. So there's like a therapeutic use of meditation when you meditate a little bit just to relax and be a better teacher. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about, like going all in, just meditating for the rest of your life and doing nothing but that. Let me do this. So wonderful thing. I'll tell you a story sometime. Maybe I should tell a story now. So this is a wonderful. In Japanese, you call this oto no switchi, sound switch. It's a mini singing bowl. I got it from a very special place in Japan. It's Hieizan. It's the Buddhist temple complex at Enryakuji. Hieizan Sakamoto. It's near Kyoto. And it's a very special place because, well, I'll tell you, ask me sometime. I'll tell you about my relationship with Buddhism. Well, I've already alluded to that. Like, to me, my basic interlocutors in this course are Buddha, Marx, and Foucault. And notice that Buddha is not Marx and Marx is not Foucault. And this is why, for me, this is an interesting debate and dialogue, and they're kind of pulling in different directions. There's some overlap, and I would say that Buddha, Marx, and Foucault, all three are mechanistic thinkers, anti-teleological thinkers, but also they're different. And to me, this is a very productive dialogue also. Okay, I feel like I'm rambling too much. Thank you for the compliment, Shibboleth. I'm very humbled by compliments. I have to tell you that in my neurotic perfectionism, it's very difficult for me to accept compliments because I know that I could be so much better, right, as a teacher. That it's like it's blatantly obvious to me how much I fail as a teacher. How much more I could have read before class, how much better I could have prepared, right? So it's like, but definitely, at the same time, thank you very much for the compliment. It's small consolation. Yeah, monasticism is an interesting question. I feel that there's a lot of Stoics, contemporary Stoic practice is becoming very popular. Although I don't find Stoicism very congenial. I find Buddhism much more congenial than Stoicism. But for example, here around the place where I live, the best way to introduce a bit of meditation into your life is through yoga communities. And we have different traditions around here. Buddhist yoga schools, Advaita the Hinduist yoga schools, and also a lot of Sikh yoga is popular around here as well. I have to tell you, I've very, very pleasant memories of hanging out with that kind of crowd. Anyway, I mean, you can see certain influences in my life from that direction. Anyway, colleagues, I've been going for quite a while, and maybe, hopefully, some students are gonna wanna tune into this Q&A. So I guess I should be wrapping this up here. So thank you very much, everybody who decided to join. The next lecture is going to be a proper lecture, not like this, rambling, but I'm going to try to prepare the slides and go step by step. So in the next lecture, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to talk, give you a brief rundown of naturalism from 3 different angles. We're going to briefly talk about epistemology of naturalism, basically skeptical challenges of David Hume and Immanuel Kant, and more importantly, a little bit about Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn. So this is going to be maybe 20 minutes talking about that. Then another 20 minutes, I want to talk about teleological versus mechanistic worldview, because many students hear this for the first time, and they, I need to explain this properly. Talk about Thales once again, talk about Darwin some more, talk about the idea of evolution, because I feel that the idea of evolution is the most important idea that holds the mechanistic worldview together. This is going to be probably the second 20-minute segment. And the third 20-minute segment is I'm going to talk a bit more about Heidegger and Freud. It's not going to be a full lecture on Heidegger yet, but I want to talk about Heidegger and Freud as ways of making naturalist worldview make sense from the inside. So these are the 3 20-minute segments I have planned for the next lecture. I'm hoping to cover that. Our official time limit is 80 minutes. So I think 20 plus 20 plus 20 in my math will add up to 80, I hope. So I'm going to try to do my best in preparation for that. And, until next time, if you have any questions, feel free to write in the comments on YouTube, or feel free to write to me through Microsoft Teams. Otherwise, colleagues, thank you very much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have live people to talk to. And until next time, stay safe and take care.